Hey guys, welcome back to another video at Journey to GC. Today we're going to talk with Vickie Bacon, a genetic counselor out here in Pittsburgh. She has a lot of great advice, especially about following your own path and trying to reject comparison when going through your journey and trying to reach your goals of becoming a genetic counselor, and honestly just in general. So I hope you get a lot out of this one. Enjoy.
All right, so just to start off, would you mind introducing yourself and your educational background?
So my name is Vickie Bacon. I work as a cardiac genetic counselor and a prenatal genetic counselor. As far as educational background goes, I actually did my undergrad in California at California State University of Long Beach. So I hold a bachelor's in biology. From there, I was actually out of school for about 5.5 years before I started first on my Master's of Public Health and Human Genetics, and then in my Master's of Science in Genetic Counseling at the University of Pittsburgh. I graduated in 2020 and have been working for about a year now.
That's awesome. So you mentioned the Master's of Public Health as well. Is that the combined 2-in-1 degree they have at Pitt, or is that something different that you did?
Yeah, so it is the combined one. I kind of took a bit of a different path than most students. I knew going into grad school and before I applied to GC programs that I really wanted to do a Master's of Public Health at some point. So the first time that I applied to Pitt and other schools, I did not get into the GC program, but I decided at that point to start in the MPH program since I knew it was something I wanted to do anyways. So I was actually able to do both of the degrees in 3 years, whereas a lot of students do it in 2.
Okay, that's really smart. It's a great way to pivot after those results from genetic counseling school. It seemed to be pretty common.
Yeah, it's not at all unusual for people to not get in on the first try.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a good next step for me because I knew that if I never got to become a genetic counselor, I wanted to do something in public health. So it was a good fit.
Yeah, seems like a great idea. And you just reminded me while we're on that topic, when you were starting your MPH program after the first round of genetic counseling application, is there anything else you did specifically for fortifying your genetic counseling resume for the next cycle?
Yeah, so as a student, I was able to attend tons of different events within the department. So I went to grand rounds every week, which was partially out of interest, partially out of class requirements. I was able to attend a case conference through the school and the hospitals around us. I did some volunteer work, so I was able to volunteer for the Down Syndrome Congress had their conference here, so I did some volunteer work there. Actually, I take that back. I think that was during the GC program. Sorry, it kind of all melds together. And I was able to get some shadowing experience here as well.
Okay, great. That sounds like you definitely took a lot of steps to make sure that was going to be going your way the second time around. That's really great. I guess my next question would be, you said you're a cardiac and
prenatal
specialty, prenatal. Yes. So I'm curious what led you to pick those 2 specialties out of all of them?
So it kind of just fell into place. The public health side of things is a huge passion for me. I love that about especially cardiac. So when I see patients in the adult cardiac world, they're patients who either have a personal history or a family history of either a cardiac condition or a family history that suggests a cardiac condition. So a lot of what we do is to actually see family members who are currently asymptomatic, or maybe they've had an echocardiogram that was normal, but through genetic testing, we can kind of figure out who needs to be continued to follow with cardiology and who kind of goes back to that population risk. So I see the cardiology as a huge kind of public health role. And I find it interesting, just in the motivations on that side, because for most of our patients, genetic testing isn't going to change their management, but does for their family members. With the prenatal, it was one of those ones where, the first GC that I shadowed was in prenatal, and I thought it was really interesting. I loved the psychosocial side. I thought it was something that would be a good fit. And then as I learned more about other specialties, I kind of thought, okay, prenatal probably isn't where I'll land. And then rotation started, I just fell in love with that side of it. So when it came up that there was actually a job here in Pittsburgh that was going to be half cardio, half prenatal, it was my two favorite specialties. So I really kind of lucked into that.
That's really exciting. I guess I didn't really realize how you could have two different specialties like that. Is that something that's very common, or can you, I always assumed you'd have to kind of fall into just one of them, but can you have different, maybe even kind of unrelated specialties that you work on in a typical career?
Yeah, so for a fair number of GCs, they do split their time. So I work with a genetic counselor who works in the prenatal clinic, and then for part of the time she works in the Huntington's disease clinic. Two very unrelated ones that she sees patients in both. For a while, I was working prenatal, adult, and cardiology. So kind of getting a smattering of everything but cancer. I don't think it's uncommon for GCs to do that. It all depends on what the need is and where they are. And then one of the nice things about GCs is that even if you are in one specialty, if you decide you want to go work in a different specialty, that's something that you're trained for and something that you can do.
Okay, that's definitely reassuring. You could have different interests being fulfilled, and I guess even change it if you wanted to at some point.
Yeah,
it's definitely really exciting. So would you mind walking me through what kind of a typical day looks like for you?
Yeah, so I guess I have a few different ways days go. So for prenatal days, I see anywhere from 1 to maybe 6 patients, depending on the day. Those days are primarily with patients, going over ultrasounds, going over screening findings, family histories, things like that. Within that clinic, there's often times where you have the patients you expect to see, and then we'll have add-on patients because something urgently came up. On the cardiac side, I work really closely with one of our cardiologists, so I'm actually in the clinic with him. So I get to go in with him and meet the patients and then do the genetic counseling while he focuses more on the kind of management and the cardiac side of it, which has been a fantastic opportunity because he'll take the time to show me echocardiograms and explain the ECGs to me and everything. So it's been a good learning experience. In between patient visits, you're doing notes, calling patients, following up. I have 1 day a week that I have just protected admin time to where I'm writing letters of medical necessity, catching up on notes, doing all the documentation.
All right, that's very interesting. There's, I guess with different specialties too, it makes sense to have different kind of days sprinkled throughout your week. Do you find that most days end up being a little bit variable?
Yeah, they definitely, each day is its own thing. I have somewhat of a routine, but it's not something that I'm able to really stick to, which I like. Even going in the morning, what I expect that day to be may be completely different from what it really is.
Okay, and do you find, I guess it's along the same lines with, even though you may be doing prenatal counseling, every single week and cardiac every single week, in terms of the counseling you're going to be doing and the patient is going to be related to that field, but do you find that even though you have multiple cardiac cases, each patient has like enough uniqueness and difference to their case that it's very I don't know, is there a lot of newness to the day-to-day with that?
It doesn't get boring. So for instance, one of the cardiologists that I work the most with focuses on hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, which is a thickening of the heart muscle. And when you think about HCM or the arrhythmias or other cardiomyopathies, these are conditions that run through families. They're conditions where sometimes the first symptom in a family is sudden death. So you're coming into families where they may have been through horrible tragedies and they're adjusting to that as well as their own diagnosis, or you may have been meeting with someone who found out that they had HCM inadvertently because they were having an echo for something else. So everyone has their own story, and I think we're lucky that patients will often share those with us. So it's never the same thing twice.
That's really great. I'm sure that helped keep your job very interesting.
Yes.
So to transition to the next thing I'm wondering is, what would you say your favorite part of being a GC is, if you could pinpoint that?
So there's a lot that I love about it. For instance, giving someone a negative genetic test result is a feeling that I don't think I'm ever going to get sick of. One of the things that I really love about what we do is the fact that we're there to give patients the information so they can make their own decisions. And I love being able to sit down with someone and break down sometimes this really difficult scientific information and relate it to them and their family. And then not only take that side of it, but talk to them about the psychosocial aspects. So how is this diagnosis going to affect their family? Who else is at risk? What are they feeling about this? And I love being able to just kind of take all of that together and take the time with the patient so that they can really make their own informed decisions about their health.
That's definitely something that I think would be really rewarding, the negative test results. I know that personally, when I've thought about this career, one of the first things you think of is how it's probably a lot of sensitive conversations you have to have that may be some unfortunate news once in a while. But I definitely at first overlooked the fact that a lot of the time, maybe it is a good result in terms of being negative for something they tested. So that's definitely very reassuring, and I'm sure it's a great thing to be able to share with your patients.
Yeah, it's definitely an amazing feeling when you can tell them, the test was negative.
That's awesome. On the flip side, can you pinpoint anything that is one of the most frustrating parts of your job, or something you don't like as much?
So I'd be lying if I said this job didn't have some days where it was emotionally taxing. We give out good news, we give out bad news. So that's definitely something where you kind of have to go into it knowing that and being able to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and that you're really monitoring your own mental health, and that you have support. I think the thing that I probably rant about and complain about the most is barriers to care. So, there's definitely not great mechanisms in place for genetic testing across the board. So sometimes you have patients who are interested in doing a genetic test, they want that test, and there's a cost for it. It's costly, and it's something where their insurance isn't going to cover it, or it is, but it's going to be a high out of pocket. And that to me is difficult to handle. It's really frustrating when you can see what this patient wants and what's the next step for them, and there's a barrier to it.
I've definitely heard that response from some of the other counselors I've had the privilege to talk to, but about the insurance and everything. Have you, noticed or seen any trend at all with insurance becoming more understanding of the need for genetic counseling, and maybe becoming more open to providing coverage for those kind of things?
I've only been in practice for about a year, so I don't know how well I can speak to that. I feel like we've been able to get quite a few things covered lately, which has been helpful. I hope that it'll continue to get better, but I think that's going to require a lot of advocacy from the GC community, from the patient community, from people in general.
Absolutely. I hope it continues to go that way, because it would be a shame. It seems like with the growing awareness of the field and the growth of the field itself, that hopefully it is headed in that direction. But
Yeah.
all right, and the last thing I have for you is for someone in my position getting ready to apply to genetic counseling school or start genetic counseling school in general. What is one piece of advice that you didn't know when you were in my shoes that you know now that you would like to share with maybe your former self?
So everyone takes their own path, and there is not really a right way to go about going to genetic counseling school or really anything in life at this point. So for me, I took longer to do my undergrad than most students. I was in for, I think, 5.5 years. My GPA was nothing to write home about. So when I walked into interviews, I had taken classes to boost that. I had done everything that I thought I could. But when I walked into interviews, it was still hard to sit there and not think about, okay, everyone else in this room is so much more experienced than I and so much more qualified. And it's definitely easier to say than it is to do, but don't compare yourself to everyone else. You're on your own path, you're on your own journey. You do what's right for you and be your own person.
That's excellent advice. Thank you very much. I think a lot of people need to hear that. I know myself included, but it's a really easy trap to fall into with comparison, but that's a great point. And clearly you're a great example of being able to still pull it off through whatever circumstance, if it's a first try or the, whatever degree you start to get first or anything like that. So it's great advice. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Well, you've been very helpful today, very insightful. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. It's been really hard with COVID getting to shadow or speak with anyone, but I really do appreciate that.
My pleasure, and I wish you luck.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, guys, once again, that was Vickie Bacon. Thank you so much for speaking with me. I really appreciate the time. And that's just one more in this series of genetic counselor interviews. So stay posted for more. Got more coming on the way. See you next time.